This is Alan Gray for North Dallas Gazette Live with U.S. Representative Colin Allred for the 32nd Congressional District of the United States. Hello, sir. How are you?
Hey, Alan, I'm good. How are you?
Doing good. Thank you so much for sharing your time today.
No, happy to. How are you doing? You hanging in there?
Yeah, I'm making it, man. I'm making it. Yeah, I'm at South Oak Cliff High School. I'm an assistant principal as well.
Oh, you're at SOC.
Yeah,
Okay.
man. Yeah. So,
yeah, SOC's Hillcrest and SOC used to be in the same district.
I know that was a long while ago.
Yeah.
You're a fairly young guy. I'm up in age, so both schools have a long and storied history.
Yeah. But I played against SOC. They were in our district when I was at Hillcrest.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had some friends from there.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end, I'd like a couple of my students wanted to ask a question.
Sure.
I'd at least like to get one.
Yeah.
But let's begin.
Okay.
This trend that we've seen even over the past two days with voting, Representative Allred, what is that an indication of?
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mr. Gray, for having me. And I want to thank the North Dallas Gazette for caring about local issues and for taking the time to speak with me. I think the people are really excited to vote. I think they've also seen and read a lot about efforts to stop them from voting. And they feel like they're gonna show whoever's trying to stop them that they're gonna cast their ballot and nothing's gonna get in their way. And so I'm really proud of I think these first 2 days we've broken our record for early voting. And this is an extra week for us. So we're really not even into the period where we normally are, which is early voting in most elections wouldn't start until next week. So I think it's a great indication of how excited people are, but also how determined they are to vote in this election.
Let's talk about that determination aspect. There seems to be a disconnect between the powers that be in government and the common man. You're from Dallas. You didn't live a privileged life coming up. How does a politician's background enable or disable him to connect with the needs of the populace?
Well, I think when we use the word experience, we often are talking about your work experience. For example, I was a voting rights lawyer before I came to Congress. I worked in the Obama administration, but there are other experiences that you can get growing up. And I think those are lived experiences. And since I was raised here in Dallas by a single mother who was teaching in DISD schools and taught at North Dallas High School and Roosevelt High School and Marsh Middle School. And so that taught me a lot about what families are going through right now. No one has to tell me what it's like to have a family that's struggling and not sure how they're going to pay the bills the next month. I know that from personal experience. I also know the struggles that families are going through in terms of childcare right now in the middle of this pandemic, where some people can't go to work, others have to go to work, but don't have anywhere to send their kids. And so, you can learn some of these things if you're an empathetic person, you put the effort in, you put the work in. I'm not saying you have to grow up that way. But when you do grow up that way, I think it gives you some insight that, you can't read in a book.
Right. I agree with you. Speaking of struggles, one item that is a big on your agenda is healthcare and rising prices of prescription medications. You want to talk to me a little bit about that and how it can affect constituents?
Well, first of all, most folks, I think, expect that if they need to have some medication, like they have diabetes or something like that, that they should be able to afford that and they should be able to go about living their lives and doing whatever they're doing to contribute to society. But right now, about 1 in 4 Americans have to ration their insulin if you're a diabetic. And that's something that you really can't ration. You're not supposed to. It's to keep you alive. And there are a lot of seniors who have to decide every month between getting all the medication they need and being able to feed themselves that month. There are a lot of families who are making those same decisions. There are parents who are going to go without so their kids can get their medication. I don't think that's what we should be doing in this country. I think that we should be controlling the cost, as you said, of prescription drugs so that, yeah, we want to have it so that the next miracle drug is still developed, and that, you know, things that used to be a death sentence are now just manageable diseases. And that's great. We love that innovation. But the price gouging that we're seeing of the American people on something like insulin that's been around for over 100 years, that, you know, there's not like there's developmental costs going into that, right? And that we see price gouging that I think really has to be addressed. And so we passed legislation in the House of Representatives that I was a part of and co-sponsored and helped introduce to try and basically use the leverage that we have as government to negotiate drug prices. And so the biggest lever we have is Medicare. Medicare is by far the largest purchaser of prescription drugs in the country. And if Medicare sets rates, then those rates will affect everyone and lower costs for everyone. Right now, unfortunately, in the law, Medicare is not allowed under the law to negotiate drug prices. And so basically they just have to pay whatever the cost is. And that means that we don't have any leverage there. If you're a veteran in the Veterans Affairs system, we negotiate drug prices. We do this in a lot of other areas, but just not doing it for the Medicare system. And so this is something that we recognize that we can get done. Right now, we don't have folks in the Senate enough to join us, and we don't have a president who's made this a priority. But I'm confident that with the President Joe Biden, and hopefully with a different Senate in the next Congress, that we'll be able to pass this and really help folks who are struggling save a lot of money.
Should Medicare, Representative Allred, be extended to others beyond, I guess it's only for the elderly now, huh?
Yeah. Well, I do think that we should consider lowering the Medicare age from 65 to 60 or even 55 to catch folks who are having to retire early because of health problems. My mom, for example, had to retire a little bit early from teaching after 27 years because of some health problems, and to allow them to get into Medicare faster. But the good news with what I was talking about with the plan is that even though Medicare would be the entity that's negotiating, it would set prices for everyone. And so it would apply to folks even who aren't on Medicare. And so we would be able to use our leverage to set the prices in the market, basically. And that market would then be passed on to everyone. And there are some other levers that we have too. There are some basically penalties for going over a certain amount of costs. There are some incentives to stay within a certain range of costs. But the idea is not to, as I said, we don't want to stifle innovation. We want the next miracle drug to be made in the United States. We want to end this kind of price gouging that we're seeing going on, particularly for medication like insulin that folks need to survive, and that it's not an elective medicine, right? Like if you're taking it, it's because you need it.
I want to talk to you, Representative Allred, about the family structure, Americans' family structure. Currently, there are only about 40% households who have a dad involved in that household. How does the absence of a mother or father affect the development of a child?
Yeah, well, it has enormous impacts across, and we've seen from the research, not just on the child, but also on the family itself. It puts much more stress on the parent who's left in the family. Outcomes are much less likely to be successful. You're going to live not as long if you, on average, if you come from a single parent household, you're going to make less money. And we know that having two parents in the home is statistically better. Obviously, in not every scenario is that possible. I mean, I was raised, as I said, by a single mother. My mom worked two jobs at times, but then we had to also get help from my aunt and uncle who helped quite a bit. And then I had a community that kind of tried to fill in. And so even where you do have a single parent household, I think if you put in place the structures to support those families, then you can start reducing and breaking out of the cycle. Because one of the things that we know happens is that if you come from a single parent home, it's more likely that you yourself will not be an engaged parent, or your child will come from a single parent home as well. And these are cycles that we have to break. And we break them, I think, by smart intervention, like good public schools, like where you work, and by providing the resources to families that they need, like childcare, so that the mother or father, whoever the single parent is, can still go to work, paid family leave, so that if they have to take some time off to take care of their child or take care of a family member, that they're able to do that. And just basically the opportunity structure has to be in place so that you can still succeed. Because what we don't want to have is what I think we have right now, which is where we're just wasting so much talent. We have so much potential that's going unrealized in our DISD schools and really across the country. Talented young people who I know and who I grew up with, who I think could have done so much more if we had given them few more opportunities. I was fortunate because I was an athlete. I used my football career to pay for my college, and then I got a chance to play in the NFL, and I used that to pay for my law school. But most people don't have that chance. It's a pretty rare chance that happens, and it was pretty actually lucky for me. Even I played with some folks in high school who I thought were better than me, and they didn't end up making it. So, that's kind of the luck of the draw. But we need to put in place the structures to support whatever type of family unit is happening. But also, of course, we need to encourage and continue to work to try and make sure that our young people understand the importance of planning their families, and that when they start a family, that they're ready to do so, that they are in a committed relationship, hopefully, and that even if they're not, that they play a role in their child's life. And that's something that we all have a job to do in terms of kind of breaking this idea that it's okay to just have a child and not be involved in their life. It's a major commitment. My wife and I have a 20-month-old right now. We've got another son on the way. Yeah, we got
another one on the way.
Yeah, and yeah, he's due in March. We'll have 2 boys, and I can tell you, we're working hard just to keep track of this little guy. And so I know how big of that commitment is. But we have to make sure that we're always stressing that having a child, being a parent, are major commitments, and that you really shouldn't do that until you're at a point in your life where you're able to take care of your child and be responsible for your family. But if something does happen, I want to make sure that we support every family and make sure that we give every family a chance. Because when I was born here in Dallas, in 1983 to a single mother, the prospects for me weren't very good. They didn't look very bright at that time. But I did, as I said, I had some institutions around me, like the YMCA, like the Dallas Public Schools, that kind of filled in some of the gaps for me. And I got a chance and I took it. And I want to make sure that we provide that chance for everybody.
Sure. Academics and being successful in school as you were plays a great part in a child, a person being ready to be a parent or whatever. Currently in the DISD, African Americans are like 20% of the DISD population, yet they account for 51% of the discipline referrals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's also this persistent gap between academic achievement between Black students and others. What can we do legislatively even? Yeah. And I mentioned our beloved DISD, but this is also a national trend. Yeah. So what can we do at the legislative level to stop this cycle?
Mm-hmm. Well, what you put your finger on is statistics that are undeniable that I think show that we have some structural barriers in place that are not working, even with, I think, great folks at DISD who are trying really hard to try and address some of these things. And we know that our kids come into our schools bearing with them all the things that society is doing to them as well. And that when they walk in those school doors, hopefully it is a refuge, but they're still bringing the world with them. And so we have to do a lot on the outside to make their lives easier. And we have to reduce, the kind of structural racism, structural barriers that are in place that do lead to some of this. But from what I've seen, as I said, my mom was a teacher. The most important thing we can do in the schools is to have a highly trained and highly qualified and caring teacher in every single classroom. And I think we do have a lot of teachers who care a lot, but we're not paying them enough. And as you know, we lose too many of our teachers who are successful to other jobs because, they can make more to take care of their families or whatever it may be. I'd like it to be that the best and the brightest of DISD go to college, become teachers, and come back and teach in DISD, because then they know that they'll not only be valued, but they'll have that value reflected in how they're compensated. So having good teachers, the most important factor in any student's improvement is having a great and qualified teacher. But then also we know that there are other structural barriers that have to be fixed. I mean, just looking at school construction and school buildings, we should never have our kids walking into school buildings that are falling apart, or that have don't have the latest technology, or don't have the ability in that school to use every modern teaching technique with them. And that's unfortunately the case in far too many of our schools. At the district level, and I think DISD is trying to address this, We have we need to address the disciplinary issues that we know are happening where disproportionately, as you said, African Americans are going to be disciplined disproportionately. Then they also fall out of school because they're either on suspension or they are detention and all of these things. And for me, and the research shows this, one of the most effective things for me with my academics was after school care programs. When I was in elementary school at Pershing, the YMCA there had an after school care program that I would go to from the time I got out of school till about 6 o'clock when I'd get picked up either by my mom or by my uncle. And that whole time I had guidance, I was playing sports, I was doing my homework, I'd get a snack, and it extended my school day basically in terms of having an adult watching me instead of me going home watching cartoons by myself or maybe getting in trouble with my friends. I had a structured environment that I was still in until I was back with my family members. I'm a big believer in after school care and how that can extend the day and also give working parents more time to do what they need to do to make the money they need to make to take care of their kids. So we have to come at this from every different angle. We have to address the structural issues around structural racism on the outside and in our schools. We need to address the lack of resources that have been for far too long. Our public schools have been underfunded, and it's always a battle, and it's going to be a battle again, unfortunately, in this next legislative session in Texas, because we're going to have a big deficit because of COVID, where they're going to talk about making deep cuts to education again. So we have to address that and try to make sure that doesn't happen. We need to have better and more qualified teachers in every single classroom who are compensated and know how valued they are and are able to put in the work. We need to support our kids after school so that they are in a structured environment throughout the day and have a real feeling that they have support systems around them. So I don't think there's any silver bullet, but I think we have to come at it from all those different directions.
Right. We're trying to do some of those things at South Oak Cliff, and when you have an opportunity, we would love to have you come and visit, and we can show you around to see some of those things that we're trying to put in place. But you are exactly right. I also want to say, Representative Allred, that my students are extremely proud to know that you're one of us, as they put it. I have a couple of questions here. One is from Javier Lara, and this has to do with sports. He wants to know, how does it make you feel knowing that you're one of only 2 former NFL players to win a seat in Congress?
It's funny. I mean, for me, my football career, I thought of it as a way to pay for my education. I always thought of it that way. When I'd come home after a game and I'd tell my mom and my aunt how I played, and they'd say, well, how'd you do on the test that day? And I'd say, well, and then because that was what they were really interested in. And it was really drilled into me that at some point I was going to stop playing. It was really drilled into me. And so I didn't know if that would be college or certainly how long I'd play in the NFL. I never thought I'd play in the NFL. Let me just clarify that too. I thought that I'd go to college and get it paid for with my scholarship that I was lucky enough to have, and that then I'd go to law school, and that would be my path. And basically, the NFL just became an option that was available to me, and I pursued it. But it's there for a really, really small amount of people. And I played with some great, great players who didn't make it for various reasons, injuries, things happening in their lives. I had a high school teammate who you wouldn't believe how talented he was. He was much better than me. He certainly should have been in the NFL, and he didn't make it. And so there's a lot of luck that goes into it too. But it's definitely true that the harder I've worked in my life, the luckier I've gotten. And, whenever I had a chance, I was able to take advantage of it because I'd done the preparation to be ready for the opportunity. And I really think that whatever your path is, whether it's as an athlete, you have to understand that at some point that athletic career is going to end. And the question is, what's going to be the rest of your life? I played football until I was 27 years old. That's pretty good, actually. But I'm going to hopefully live to be, much older than that. And most of the years of my life, I'm not going to be a football player. And so I had to have the training and something to fall back on. Even if you play to you're 35, you're gonna have the rest of your life ahead of you. And so I really want to stress that for athletes, what makes you a good athlete can make you a good student too. That same discipline that you have to put in to know your plays, to know how to work hard, to know how to work in a team, to be accountable to yourself and to others, because you know you got other people relying on you. That's the same kind of attitude that if you apply that to your school, you'll do well. Because I mean, honestly, football and some of the systems around football are complicated. If you're good at that, I guarantee you can figure out how to answer the questions in your history class or your math class. You just got to apply yourself, because you're already a smart person. I know you are, if you're keeping up with all the things that we do in sports and all the hard work that goes into it. So I'll just say, I'm thrilled to be able to represent my community in Congress. My NFL career, my sports career for me was a means to an end. I enjoyed it, but I understood that it was a tool for me to get the other training that I needed so that I could keep doing things. And so I just want to stress up, all the young people, play sports. I love it. Play all the sports you want. I played 3 sports in high school. I enjoyed my sports career. I think it made me a better person. I think it made me a more responsible person. I love, I want young people to be involved in athletics if they're interested in that. But don't make that your whole life, because at some point the game's going to end and you're going to have to, use the skills that you've learned in something else. And so just do good in your school, listen to your teachers, apply yourself to your schoolwork. Because even if you end up playing 10 years in the NFL, and I hope you do, you're going to have to fall back on that schoolwork when it's over.
Senior Wendy Perez wanted to know your view on the social issues that are happening and forming around us, the racism, the police brutality. She wanted to ask you, what would you like to accomplish in those arenas and with those topics?
Yeah. Well, what I want to see is, number one, I want to see what I would consider to be a restoration of the relationship between police and our communities, where people feel like the police are there to protect and serve, and that you have a level of trust and a level of a relationship with them that's a positive one, because that's really what it's supposed to be. And I also want to see our police not asked to do more than really what is the scope of their job supposed to be. I know that I know a lot of police officers in Dallas who, they're asked to be mental health counselors because they're dealing with a lot of folks who have mental health issues. But we should have more mental health counselors so they don't have to do that, because, it's very difficult to interact with somebody who's in crisis and having a mental health crisis. They're asked to, solve a lot of inter-family problems. They spend a lot of their time, on domestic disputes that can often turn violent. We need a counselor probably in those areas. They're asked to deal with drug issues that are really more about addiction than they are about criminality. And so I don't want to ask them to do more than is what the scope of their job is. And so we have to balance these things. And I think it does have to have levels of accountability for the police, so that if an officer makes a mistake, that they're held accountable for that the same way you would be in any other job. But it also has to be support for them and support in our communities. So as I said, we're not asking the police to cover all of the sins in our communities that we haven't covered ourselves. And so I think we have to balance these things out. And there are a lot of great police officers in our community who come from our community, who care deeply, who didn't become an officer because they wanted to have power over anybody, who became an officer because they want to protect and serve their community. I want to empower them and give them the tools they need to continue to do that, but also the tools they need that if there's a bad apple or someone who's not doing the right things, that it's not going to reflect on the entire police force or all of them. So we need to balance these things. But overall, it's our society that we have to address the most. The police and our interactions there, that's the end point. We have a middle point and a beginning point that I think is more about some of the things we were talking about earlier, which is our education system, our healthcare system, that the police are just the end point of having to deal with so many of the things that didn't happen in those other phases. And so I want to see us put in place ladders of opportunity so that everybody has a chance to pursue their version of the American dream like I was able to. And then it's up to you. It really is. It's up to you to work hard. It's up to you to take advantage of your opportunities. But if we don't give you that opportunity, then I think we've failed you. And I think as I said, I think we're letting far too much talent, far too much potential go unrealized right now.
Just for the record, if you could briefly clarify this confusion between defunding the police and abolishing the police, because they, the way it's being sold on TV, they seem to be one and the same.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think slogans don't work when you're talking about complicated issues. Any complicated issue can't be boiled down to a few words. And something like, the abolishing the police is not is a statement that doesn't have any policy around it. And understand that we need our police officers, we need our public service officers to take care of folks and to keep people safe. But what we also want to do, I think, in addition to supporting them in their job, is increase the support for some of the support programs that I think can also handle some of these other problems that I was mentioning. And so that's, we have a scarcity of mental health providers, particularly in the African American community. We don't talk enough about mental health. We don't talk enough about trauma that people experience and how that can impact their behavior as an adult. And so we need to, put a better support system there. We have issues with drug addiction, alcohol addiction, substance abuse that are really not, as I said, I don't think they're issues of criminality. They're issues of addiction, maybe also of some mental health component that should be counseled and we should seek treatment for those individuals, not have them constantly going through the criminal justice system in and out of jail. And then, of course, if you do have something happen to you, if you do get in trouble, I don't think that your life should be over from there. And far too often, if you have a record, it is much more difficult than to ever get a job, to ever get back on your feet. And so we force sometimes, folks back into their old ways when we should be providing them, I think, with some wraparound services so they can get back and be a productive member of society. And so there are a lot of things that's a very complicated approach. And I think you can't boil it down to a slogan. And I would encourage your students and anybody watching this to not try and find simple terms for complicated problems, because we have a lot of work to do and we can do it and we can do it together. But it's not just going to be something where we just have a slogan that fixes it.
Well said, sir. Final word to your constituents.
Yeah, well, it's been the honor of my life to serve these 2 years in Congress. As I said, when I was born here in Dallas to a single mother, the prospects and the idea that I'd be a member of Congress someday were pretty slim. It didn't look like that was probably going to be the outcome. But I know that I was fortunate because I had these support systems around me. I went to good public schools. I spent a lot of time at the YMCA. As I said, YMCA after school care for me was one of the most important things that happened in my life. And so that has also informed how I want to try and be a representative in terms of putting in place the support systems for families to succeed, for individuals to succeed. And then from there, it's up to you. Because I don't think government can create outcomes, but I do think that we can help create opportunities, or we can take away opportunities. And I don't want to see us not doing that, and we want to see providing more. We've done a lot in my first term in Congress, despite how crazy things have been in Washington, D.C. We've gotten a veterans hospital in Garland, which a lot of folks in North Texas come from military families or have served in the military. That's going to help us serve our veterans, 184,000 of them better, and create 5,000 jobs. It's something I'm really proud of. We've done a good job, I think, in terms of keeping our focus on local issues, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think that this period that we've been in has been so chaotic that we need to do a lot of work to pass laws to try and not only get us out of this crisis that we've been in terms of confidence in our government, in terms of the parties being at each other's throats, but to restore our democracy itself and to really make it easier for people to be engaged in their democracy, to prevent some of the things that I think we're seeing now, to try and stop people from being involved in their democracy, and to extend those ladders of opportunity so everybody feels like they have skin in the game and everybody feels like they have a chance to chase their dreams here. And that's ultimately what this is all about. So really thank you to the North Dallas Gazette for always being focused on these issues. I know that you're all doing a lot of different things, and I appreciate the time that you've taken and the platform you've given me to talk about, for example, voting rights. The op-ed that I had with y'all recently on voting and how important that is. And local journalism really matters, and people need to be able to hear from their elected officials and question them. And I appreciate y'all for doing that.
Well, thank you so much, Colin Allred, U.S. Representative for Texas 32nd Congressional District. Sir, do have a good day, and thank you again for your time.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gray. And let's talk again.
Real soon.
Yes, sir.
Have a good day.